in 2010. We updated it in 2015 and 2017, again, adopted by resolution. The plan is reviewed every year for any changes or updates. And then the full plan, as we're doing today and throughout this process, every 5 years. Like Dave already mentioned, it's a prerequisite for any non-emergency disaster assistance, such as FEMA's hazard mitigation assistance projects and the BRIC projects, to be part of this plan. So it's huge to the communities. I'm going to show you why in a minute here. Just some of the things that we're going to touch on today and the activities that we've done in the county by some of you and some of us at the county level. Flood walls, berms, protect facilities or single structures, a lift station could be used for something like that. Crystal Lake, Abigail's going to present today, as she did at the review, one of their projects for drainage to reduce localized flood. Buyouts. The village of Cary and the county have done numerous buyouts in the county. So that way we take the repetitive loss off of the insurance. Lake in the Hills and the county kind of competing right now. Lake in the Hills has been a champion at this and led the way for CRS, Community Rating System. For anybody who applies for National Insurance, Flood Insurance Program, they get a 25% discount if they live in Lake in the Hills because of the efforts that they've done. They're currently at a rating 5, county's at a rating 6, and we're hoping to catch up to them this year. So these are some of the efforts that have been done. There's many more, but these are just some of the examples that we can do and throughout the different communities and help you guys with, and it's really worthwhile. That's all I had.
Justin, back to you.
Excellent. No, thank you guys so much for setting the tone. And Dave, to put your mind at ease, I got the slides, so we're in good shape.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right. So with that, let's hop into our agenda. Bear with me for just a second. All right. So just to reiterate, we're embarking on the necessary work to update your national or your natural, I'm going to get that right, natural hazard mitigation plan this year. Among other things, the plan is the standard mechanism for communicating the county's collective understanding of its risk today and in the future, and what you'll all do to mitigate those risks, or more plainly, what you'll do to ensure the safety of your residents and your critical infrastructure. More on those benefits in a minute. The county received a grant from the Illinois Emergency Management Agency to procure the resources necessary to facilitate that update, and that's what myself and my colleagues, Kelly Reddick and Michael Farinella, are on the line here to do as well today. So today, we're officially kicking off this effort with you all, representatives from the county and local communities, to ensure this plan is comprehensive and capture those shared risks and impacts and efforts that are so important. So with that in mind, our objectives, we're going to introduce the planning process, just make sure everybody's got a good, grounded understanding of that process, as well as the criteria that FEMA has laid out for the planning process, and then how we intend to satisfy that criteria. As Dave mentioned, and Bob mentioned, we're going to have a presentation of a local hazard mitigation project from Crystal Lake, which will just be a good example of the kinds of things that we're hoping to capture and highlight in this plan. We're also going to review our timeline and our next steps, and just the roles and responsibilities of the committee, so you all have very, very clear line of sight on how you're going to be engaged and expected to participate in the coming months. Okay. All right. With that, I want to dive into the hazard mitigation planning process. But first, before we do, since we've got a minute, I wanted to see if we could maybe do a quick poll of the group here. So really quick for folks in the room, if you've got a cell phone, pull it out and just go to your browser, type in pollev.com, Once you're there, you'll be asked to enter a code. You see it right here, Fleet Mist 837. No, I did not choose this. It was chosen for me. For folks on the phone, I will drop that, or on the phone, on the computer, I will drop that link in the chat now. And what we're hoping to do is just get a general understanding of the natural hazards that you feel pose the biggest or the greatest threats to your community. So we'll give folks a minute just to sit with the instructions. I've dropped the link in the chat, so folks on the computer, feel free to click on that. It'll take you right to the poll, and I will open it up in just a second.
What's the link again? We can't read
We
it.
can't see it.
So it's poll.ev. I mean, pollev.com.
.com.
And then I'm just trying to see the.
See if I can make it bigger for you. How's that? Does that look a little bit better?
Watch.
Perfect, perfect. There's a solution for everything, I promise. All right, so yeah, on your phone in the room, punch in pollev.com, enter that Fleet Mist 837 code, and go ahead and type in what natural hazard do you feel poses the greatest threat to your community? All right, see what some responses we're getting. Okay, so we're seeing flooding, torrential rainfall, drought, flash flooding, severe weather. Still seeing some answers come in. Extreme colds, flash flooding, extreme rainfall. Flooding seems to be at the top of the list. Okay, I see a tornado. See fire. Okay.
Let me guess we're fired.
All right, severe drought, torrential rainfall, flooding. All right, looks like the popcorn has the proverbial popcorn has almost stopped here. Okay, see drought again. Getting some more inputs here. So as you can see, it looks like, flooding, extreme rain events, those types of things, and drought. Interestingly enough, I see ice here too, or some of the things that are bubbling up as the greatest threats to the community, which is good. Just looking to see kind of where folks are at in terms of what they're seeing as the greatest threat. All right, thanks for bearing with me. With that, I'll go ahead and lock this down and kick it over to my colleague, Kelly Reddick, who's going to do some hazard mitigation planning refresh for everybody. So Kelly, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Justin. That was an awesome poll. So for those of you who I haven't met yet, it is nice to meet you virtually. My name is Kelly Reddick. I am a senior managing consultant with ICF, and I have about 10 years of experience in the hazard mitigation planning and funding space. I'm also a floodplain manager. So I'm love to see all of this, sort of flood risk and, CRS discussion. It's very exciting for me. So we'll go ahead and dive in. Justin, if you want to hit advance on the slide, and I'll just give the team an overview here on, how FEMA views hazard mitigation planning, what their process looks like, and, kind of the key planning processes that we have to meet and document in order for McHenry County and its participating communities to, get the planning credit for this effort. So the purpose of FEMA's hazard mitigation plan is really to develop a long-term strategy for reducing risk related to natural disaster damage, community disruption, and of course, those repetitive loss impacts. There are several studies that document the return on investment for hazard mitigation. Dave actually stole my statistic, but
Sorry.
on average, about $1 spent on mitigation saves about $6 in future damages and disruptions caused by natural hazards. So this, of course, changes based on what you are actually mitigating. So, for example, I've seen some statistics that protecting water and wastewater infrastructure provides 31 times the return on investment. But ultimately, FEMA really requires communities to have an updated and approved hazard mitigation plan to be eligible for financial assistance related to disaster recovery and mitigation. So these plans better position communities to understand risk related to natural hazards, develop mitigation strategies to address that risk comprehensively, and really to foster relationships between jurisdictions and stakeholders. So this planning process is really intended to increase the county's capacity and readiness to apply for FEMA grant funding, especially that Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program that everybody's been talking about once the annual application cycle opens. Next slide, please. So what I really love about FEMA's planning process is there is actually a prescribed hazard mitigation planning process that reduces the loss of life and property by minimizing the impact of disasters. There are actual regulations for this that are laid out in the Code of Federal Regulations, which are applicable to local governments who develop, update, and implement their local mitigation plans, as well as the FEMA and state officials who review and approve those plans. So it's really nice to see IEMA and FEMA's checklist for reviewing and approving the plan that McHenry County develops right up front so we can make sure we're hitting all of those pieces. But essentially, FEMA's planning process and what we'll be doing through this effort is broken into 4 parts. So the first is to organize the planning process and resources, where a community sort of establishes its committee, its planning participants, its stakeholders, and technical experts. So that's part of what we are doing today and why you're all here. Then there is conducting or updating a natural hazard risk assessment. And then there's a mitigation strategy component, which is really the heart of the mitigation plan and identifies the goals, objectives, and actions that a community will take to reduce those natural hazard threats that were identified in step 2. And then lastly, there is a state and FEMA plan review process before it's formally approved and then adopted by McHenry County and its jurisdictions. So FEMA also requires community engagement to be embedded in the mitigation planning process at 2 levels. So there are stakeholders, which includes this group. So that includes local and regional agencies, regulatory authorities and infrastructure utilities, jurisdictions, even neighboring communities. And if we can get them, major employers. We've got some folks from University of Chicago representing the academia community. And then, even nonprofit or community groups. Then the second level of engagement is with the general public, who have to be offered an opportunity to provide feedback on the plan while it's still in draft form and before it is finalized. So Justin and Shaylin with McHenry County have created a really fantastic and robust engagement plan to make sure that we are sufficiently engaging both stakeholders and the public, and that we're documenting all of those processes appropriately, which I think we're going to be, chatting about later. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit of, the nitty gritty about the planning process. We do have supporting slides and details for each of these steps, but in the interest of time, we'll just stick to the high points for each. So for the planning process and really getting organized in the effort, here are the primary activities that we're looking at. One is establishing and convening the mitigation committee, which has already been done. Then is planning for stakeholder and public engagement, which is why we're all here today. We're kicking off that stakeholder engagement piece. And then there is beginning the data collection and existing plan review process, which we have also started to review, plans that have been developed or updated since McHenry last updated its mitigation plan and have started to pull in new information to supplement what we already have. And then one of FEMA's new requirements for the mitigation planning process is to document opportunities provided for underserved communities and vulnerable populations. So the stakeholder and engagement plan that Justin and Shaylin have pulled together really make sure that a lot of that robustness is to make sure that we're, pulling in those underserved communities and reaching out to them. Next slide. So then the risk assessment. Since this risk assessment is going to be an update of the existing plan, we will essentially be revisiting appropriate natural hazards for this effort. We've already started updating critical asset data and refreshing the history of hazards over the last 5 years. So once we kind of get all of our information together, we will systematically score the extent, the impact or the consequence, the probability of occurrence, and the vulnerability of each hazard and threats that are present to McHenry County and its jurisdictions. And we're going to engage with this group on that. We have a risk assessment workshop that Justin will tell you all about later that we have planned for the end of February. And during that meeting, we will really be walking through a lot of this data that we've been collected and making sure that the assessment of risk is representative of how McHenry County and its jurisdictions really understand it. And because of FEMA's new planning guidance, we are going to be looking at future conditions associated with future development, with climate change, and things like that. So we have to make sure that we're discussing those points in the risk assessment as well. So on the next slide, there's a brief layout of the risk assessment process that we'll be following, but we can discuss this in greater detail at the risk assessment workshop next month. Next slide. Thank you. So as I noted before, the mitigation strategy is really the heart of the mitigation plan. So once we update our risk assessment, we'll be moving into establishing those goals, objectives, and actions to reduce the threats that are identified in the risk assessment. So one of the things that we like to do when we set up a mitigation strategy is to develop an action plan and a roadmap where we are identifying existing policies, programs, funding, and other resources available to actually implement the projects that are identified. And grant funding is a big component of that, but so is the capability and capacity of McHenry County and its jurisdictions to be able to carry those projects forward. Personally, I like setting these, roadmaps up in a spreadsheet or a database so it's easier to track and maintain as a living strategy. But we'll be working with the county to determine what the best tool will be to, really allow the county to continue to maintain your plan in a good way. Next slide, please. And then lastly, for the plan maintenance, was that Dave?
Yeah, I did put the hand up, but I wanted to say something
Oh,
about
sorry.
the slide. And so one of the things that we talked to ICF on early on is I've seen a number of hazard mitigation plans. And I remember the first one I did in Lake County around the same time McHenry County did its first one. And it was everybody has something in there, right? So I'm going to build a levee and I'm going to do with this and I'm going to do with that. But it wasn't an integrated plan. And one of the things we talked with ICF was I love to see it work together so that we have, if Algonquin's doing something that ties into perhaps something with Crystal Lake or what have you, we complement each other instead of just separate ideas around the county. So if we can reach that, that would be great, as part of our strategy. And, our Western communities have different, what we'll find, they have different threats and risks than, or greater risk to some things than maybe our Eastern communities. But where it can tie together, I'd really like to pull that together. So it's just not that's the county's thing and that's Crystal Lake's and that's Richmond's thing. We have some more common things that we're chasing. And grant requests or applications are much stronger when they're multi-jurisdictional, when they are, tied together. And we'll even look at some things from Lake or Boone or Kane County to see how we can tie that together. I don't want to get in the way of the plan, but it's I think it's really valuable that we work together to, the river runs through a lot of our communities. So things we can do there may affect multiple communities. So that's my speech and sermon for the day, or my hope and dream. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, and the way that we've kind of designed the risk assessment update, and the mitigation strategy. So we'll be having a goals and objectives workshop for the mitigation strategy after we have the risk assessment workshop. And we are currently designing both of those working sessions to be in-person events where all of the jurisdictions who are participating in the plan can be in the same room, and we can really, work with you all to work together to make sure that we are accurately assessing the risk and then identifying strategies that folks can work on together to address that risk. All right. So lastly, once that mitigation strategy is developed, we will actually need to describe the process for maintaining the mitigation plan until the next 5-year update, which will include mitigation committee meetings and any planned stakeholder or public engagement. I think McHenry County has a pretty robust process so far. You meet every year. We were actually invited to your last meeting where, a lot of jurisdictions presented the mitigation activities that you had completed. And so we want to make sure that, we're maintaining that really good plan update process. Next slide, please. So once the plan is drafted, McHenry County is actually going to submit the draft to IEMA, who will conduct their review with the state and local review guide checklist and ensure the plan meets FEMA's criteria, and they'll provide comment and recommendations for improvement. So once IEMA is satisfied with the review process, then IEMA will submit the plan to FEMA for review, who goes through their review process on their own. So after FEMA has reviewed, they will actually issue an approval pending adoption notice to McHenry County. And once the county and participating jurisdictions formally adopt the mitigation plan, the adoption resolutions will be submitted to IEMA, and the plan is officially active in FEMA's system. And so really what we want to get to, and I think Justin will be showing sort of a schedule, but we really want to get to a point where that approval pending adoption notice has been received by McHenry County prior to the next cycle of BRIC and flood mitigation assistance grants being submitted. So I hope I didn't, jump in and steal Justin's thunder, but that's sort of the thinking behind a lot of our planning process and the schedule that we've put together. Any questions on the planning process so far? I know we went through that pretty quickly, but we will continue to revisit this process and remind folks where we've been and where we are as we continue to have these monthly meetings. Cool. Well, if that's all, I will pitch it back to Justin. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Bear with me for just a second. All right. So now that everybody knows more or is refreshed about the hazard mitigation planning process and FEMA's requirements, I want to talk about our approach, right? How do we put this into reality, including what the role of the committee is to accomplish the effort. So I'll let everybody kind of digest this for a minute. This is an overview of our timeline, right? So as Kelly mentioned, at a high level, our goal is to complete a final draft update to the current plan by the end of May, early June 2023 this year, so that we can give ourselves, at least 3 months to coordinate reviews with IEMA and then FEMA and adjudicate their feedback and resubmit so we get that that interim approval so that we're ready to go after some federal funding dollars starting this fall to implement some of those mitigation projects that we've had on the docket or that we're going to completely come up with as we go through this process. Again, just to reiterate, following FEMA approval, the county is going to work with individual communities to formally adopt that plan. And then additionally, the county will reconvene this committee as needed to conduct plan maintenance. More to come on that down the road. Most importantly, is we've got really just about 5 or 6 months to refresh this plan, get it out to the state, up to the state, and then to FEMA to get that approval so that we're ready to go after some competitive grant dollars in the fall to do some much needed mitigation for you guys. What you'll note here, or I guess just to orient you briefly, some of these big milestones we've got on top of February, March, April, May. These are things that are going to occur during these days. We've got scheduled committee meetings, right? We don't want to put you out. We want to reduce the number of meetings you all need to participate in. We know you're busy. So we want to be very, very tactical with how we engage you, right? So as Kelly mentioned, specifically for the February and March meetings, those will be a little longer. They'll also be more interactive, right? It won't be myself kind of floating on a screen. I'll be there talking to you, but we'll be having a lot more of a discussion as we kind of dive into our risk, help find some of those points of integration that Dave was keyed in on earlier, and then kind of co-create some mitigation strategies to ultimately help us reduce the threat to some of those natural hazards risks that are bubbling up, to that kind of high, medium level through our risk assessment. That said, just to reiterate, it will be in person. That's because of the interactive nature of it. It'll be difficult to engage with virtually. We'd love for everybody to attend. We'll get that. It's already scheduled on your calendar. We'll update that calendar invite as soon as we can so that folks can plan accordingly. But that said, if there's just no way you can make February 23rd in person or March 30th in person, that's okay. There's going to be plenty of time to provide feedback on the actual plan throughout the spring. So plenty of opportunities to make sure that your voice is heard, that your opinion's heard, that we've identified those really important efforts and mitigation priorities for each community to make sure that this is truly a comprehensive plan that's reflective of this entire county. All right. Now, I just want to talk very specifically about the role of the committee. All right. So we've got kind of a punch list of things here. I'm just going to touch on each of these very, very briefly. So these represent the responsibilities of this group of folks. So first and foremost, you're already doing it, so you can pat yourselves on the back, participating in these monthly committee meetings and workshops, right? So they'll always be on the last Thursday of the month. For this month, for April, for May, they'll be from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Central Time. And as I mentioned, our next couple months in February and March, those meetings are going to be a little bit longer. They'll be in person. I believe we're still locking down a location, so we'll get that information out to folks as soon as possible. And again, it'll be in person, given the highly detailed and interactive nature of our agenda. So really looking forward to that. Next, we're looking for y'all. We're looking for your input on any natural hazard related plans, reports, or technical data. So plans, if you've got a hazard mitigation plan or emergency operations plan, looking for that. If you've got a flood study or anything like that in a report, looking for that. And then any technical data. I always like to say, best available data, things that we've new information that we've received, since 2017. Looking for that. We're going to talk about that more in just a second, so I'll put a pin on it. So in addition, like Kelly mentioned, we know you guys are doing great work at the local level, right? We're going to hear from Crystal Lake in a moment. I remember in November, I think we saw a really good presentation from Lake in the Hills, their stream restoration project. Huntley had an awesome presentation about the Tree City USA Growth Award. So also looking to collect those things, right? We want to make sure that those are very much front and center in the plan as we're looking for strategies to mitigate the risk that we're finding. Again, some of those great things that are happening at the local level could be scaled up and shared with your partners in other communities. So we're also going to be doing a data call for that. Again, looking for location, a description of the effort, impact if we know it, So all that to say, we'll be following up after this meeting for those two pieces of information. All right. Number 4, we may at times, reach out directly and request, some data, see if you've got it, to inform our risk assessment. So that'll be happening more on an ad hoc basis. But just, kind of want you to be aware that those requests may be coming from EMA. Also importantly is we need to, as Kelly mentioned, do our best to involve the local residents, the folks with lived experience in this process. So part of that is going to be deploying a survey where we're really going to be asking folks to share, some of their experience living through, natural disasters, experience with natural hazards, their feelings and their level of preparedness, as well as just knowing where to go, who to talk to, how they like to receive information, all those kinds of things. So as we're developing our mitigation approaches, we're grounding them in reality. We're grounding them in how the public, likes to receive information and thinks about these things. So we'll be putting out a survey. It'll run for about 4 or 5 weeks. At the beginning of February. So we'll obviously, would love your guys' help to broadcast some communication around that. All right, almost done. Bear with me, guys. In addition to that, as Kelly mentioned, we'll do a mitigation strategy workshop, right, where we all come back together in March and start to brainstorm some potential mitigation actions to help address some of the threats that we're seeing. And like I mentioned, we're also going to ask you to, at times to review and provide comments on that draft plan, on that refreshed plan. So that'll happen more in that April timeframe. And then last but not least, the icing on the cake, we'll work with you to help support adoption of that refresh plan, rather. All right. Any questions? I do want to pause and see if folks have any questions about roles and responsibilities here. All right.
Here. Yeah.
I'm hearing none, taking silence for concurrence. So I mentioned, we're really looking for you all. Kelly spoke about compiling data, right? And, we don't want to miss anything. I know it's kind of an impossible goal, but we've set it for ourselves anyway. So, what you're seeing on the slide here, and I'll kind of let folks marinate on this. I mean, this is what we've got so far, right? From the federal, state level, from, kind of the more regional and county level, and then from the local level, kind of all of the plans, the studies and reports, and the technical information that's publicly available, right? That we know of. Most important caveat there, that we know of. So what we're looking for you to do is just tell us what else, right? So don't have to do it right now. Obviously, if you're looking at this list and saying, hey, my community has a comprehensive plan, I don't see it here, or hey, we helped Army Corps or the state do a flood study, or do any kind of study that's relevant to the scope of this work. We definitely want to see it. So if you know of one now that's got a link, to a publicly available link, feel free to drop that in the chat if you're attending virtually. If you know of one and you're in the room, please let Dave and Bob know, because we definitely want to make sure that we're not kind of leaving any stone unturned, so to speak. So what I'll do is just give folks a minute to sit with this list. Think about, again, either the hazard mitigation specific plans, other plans that touch hazard mitigation, any studies and reports that have happened or occurred since 2017 that we want to be cognizant of, as well as any technical information that we want to make sure that we include. So again, if you've got any of this and you're not seeing it here, that means we definitely want you to send it. We definitely want to see it. So again, if you're virtual, drop a link in the chat or just drop the name of it in a chat. And if you're in the room, just make sure Bob and Dave, chat with them afterwards. We'll hopefully try to get you out a couple minutes early, chat with them afterwards, and just let them know, hey, we've got something I think your folks are going to want to see, and we'll make sure to grab it.
Justin, I think Dave and Ernest have their hands up.
Awesome. Dave, go ahead.
So our screen, it's a little bit hard to read, so the people in this room may not be seeing all the data there. Backfire of me saying don't send the PowerPoint out ahead of time. We'll get the PowerPoint out to them and let them review, so it may be a couple days before people can say, hey, it's not on that list. So I just want to let you know that we may not get all that input today. It may be a few days.
All good. Yeah. And thanks, Dave. And like I said, once we send out the slides and the notes, we'll also kind of re-tee up these requests. So it's top of mind for folks. Ernest, go ahead.
A question. I don't know if under the word data, you're also looking at receiving any information regarding CLOMARs and LOMARs, because they've been filed all over the county and within municipalities throughout McHenry County. And although they're small pieces of the puzzle, if you get 2 or 3 of them along a water course and they're saying either the floodplain is more or the floodplain is less, they're fantastic indicators, but I don't know if you're going to want all of that information as well.
That's a great question. That's a great question, Ernest. And we'll take that back with the team. We're obviously looking at the flood insurance rate map from across the county, but we'll have a get back for you around specific CLOMAR and LOMAR data. But great question. Great item to tee up. Okay. Excellent. We'll take a look one more time in the chat to see if any hands are raised. I do not see any. So with that, actually, before the wrap up, I'm going to pull up our slides for our 2 presenters today. And I want to welcome them. Are our folks from Crystal Lake in the room?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So just let me know when you want me to drive the slides. Just say, hey, next slide, and I'll do it for you. Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, the floor is yours.
All right, my name is Abby Wilgreen. I'm the city engineer for Crystal Lake. I'm just going to go through some stormwater solutions initiatives, is what we called it, that we started back in 2017. So next slide. So ever since actually I've been to the city since 2007, we've experienced flooding throughout the city, specifically around Crystal Lake. There's different areas, and over the years we've tried to tackle them. But really in 2017, we really created this big initiative to get started to actually implement some of the projects. From 2007 to 2017, we did do some smaller ones, but we really put a focus after that 2017 event to really get down to what needs to be done in each of these areas. So the first thing that we did is we divided kind of our problem areas into 9 different study areas. And these were the areas that kind of had larger impacts when we had rain events occur. We identified near, mid, and long-term projects. And I think the key that we did different in 2017 is we actually met with each of these groups. We had over 20-some meetings with people in a matter of a couple months. But what we did is we met with the residents and said, okay, what do you see as the problem? Instead of us engineers, we just want to solve a problem. We said, okay, residents, what do you see? What do you see as the problem? What do you see as the solution? Some of them were crazy, some of them were good ideas. There's lots of residents that have been here since they were kids. So they had lots of insight on different things that they've seen over the years. So I think that was really kind of a critical component that we did, was actually taking that time and listening to all of them. So we had an initial meeting with all of them, listened to them, went back, used our engineering staff to kind of figure out, okay, here's some solutions that we could come up with. And then some groups, we actually went back and met with them again to get their buy-in before we actually moved the projects forward. So I think if you have any stormwater flooding problems, that's definitely something that will be very beneficial to do. So next slide. So did we prioritize the projects? So we actually looked at, first which areas had structures or homes that were flooded. Then also any roadway flooding that would impact the structures or properties. So there's some areas where the water would go down the road, but the storm sewer is too small. So that water overflowed and went, into the residents' homes. So we kind of looked at those areas first. I guess the other thing we didn't do is some residents came and said, oh, well, the groundwater came into our basements and stuff like that. We can't alleviate that. We kind of direct them to like floodproofing and stuff like that. But we really prioritize based on basements and basements being flooded and then some yard flooding. But really it was the basements or the roadways being impassable. I guess that's the other one I forgot. If there's any roads that were impassable and we needed to do some sort of improvement to help that. Next slide. Next slide, please. So since 2017, oops, sorry, go back to the last one. I spoke too fast. So since 2017, we've actually completed 18 projects throughout the city. Those are all the stars in yellow. We have a couple more left, about 4 or 5 left. We really want to focus on. Some of them I'll talk about at the end, but we have accomplished quite a bit. So we're happy with what we've been able to get done.
Wow.
Next slide. So one of the areas we have is we call our Pine Street and Oriole Trail study area. So this was an area that, like I mentioned before, the water from Crystal Lake Avenue, our storm sewer is so old, the storm sewer couldn't take it when it rained, and then the water would come down and end up in this bowl in this backyard. That little green area on the map, it wasn't many homes, but it literally was like a bathtub. The water would just flow off the road, go into this bathtub, fill up really high, go into people's basements. Some of the residents had bought pumps and were trying to pump it out. Towards the end, we actually helped pump out sometimes. So it was, the problem with it is that the backyard bowl is the same elevation as the lake. So there was nowhere for the water to go. So even though it couldn't ever get out of the bowl because they were the same elevation as the lake. So when the groundwater's high, it basically had to just evaporate, or you just had to wait. And during these years that we've all experienced, when the rain is just repetitive, it never went anywhere. You had to wait for a drought year. So touch base and all that. Yep, next slide, please. Like in this camera. These are just some pre-existing conditions. You can kind of see how the water would just sit in that backyard back there, and then that one in the bottom right, it would get up into some of their basements and a lot of their garages. Next slide. So we looked at some different solutions. One of them was to put in a pump station, but obviously there's long-term maintenance costs of that. And then where are we going to pump the water? Because the water here, the Crystal Lake Avenue storm sewer ends up at the lake. Well, the lake gets high, so really there was no feasible solution on where to put the water. So our next solution was, well, what if we purchase some houses? It's not in the FEMA floodplain or anything like that, but still we kind of take that same premise of, all right, if we purchase some of these houses, then we can provide that safe location to store the water instead of in people's basements. So we worked with our stormwater consultant and identified 5 homes. They're in the red right there that we could potentially purchase. So a couple of those homes, their backyards extended all the way into that depressional area. So that made sense to purchase some of those. And then it was basically purely based on topography and then their impact is how we selected the homes that we wanted to move forward with purchasing. So over the years, we did apply for IEMA and FEMA grant flooding in 2018 and 2019. We weren't successful in obtaining any flooding or any grant funding for that. But in, I think it was like 2019, IDNR did provide a state reimbursement grant for us and actually ended up covering 100% of the cost to purchase the homes. So, which was a big win and obviously very helpful, moving this project forward. So next slide. Oh, sorry, that just showed the blue shows the area where the water would sit, but right there. So the grant, it did cover everything. So it covered the appraisals, the acquisition, the demolition, the restoration. And we also want to point out that it was all voluntary. So these residents were not forced out. It was their choice if they wanted to. We did have one resident that was like, no, I don't really want to. I'm going to stay here. And we were like, that's fine. You know, no big deal. It obviously took a while, not obviously, but it did take a while to acquire these homes. We had an elderly couple. We had one gentleman that actually passed away while we were trying to acquire it. And as we move forward, we were kind of going near the end. We had one more house we were closing on. And that one guy that said, I changed, he came back and he's like, I changed my mind. Would you still, you know, purchase my home? And we were absolutely. So he kind of came around and said, I do want to purchase. So we did end up actually purchasing all 5 homes, but we were in the process of kind of redesigning if we were just going to obtain 4, but it was 100% voluntary.
Yeah, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Something interesting happened when I first got to the county. I went with Dennis Sandquist to a neighborhood because we wanted to buy out homes, and I thought they were going to lynch us, and just it was aggressive, and they didn't want government to come in and tell them anything. And then a few years later, we went, and it was open arms. Where do we sign? Here's my house, and here's the keys. And definitely a change in people in how they looked at those buyouts. Because that first one, I didn't know if we were going to get out of there alive, and we did. I'm here, you know. Dennis isn't here anymore. Well, he's in Mexico. But anyways, so you know, when you hear about this, and for those of us around a little while, buyouts were a horrible word and a bad word, but it's not what it used to be. So that shouldn't scare anybody away. And your success here just further underlines that people's attitudes have changed a little bit, or maybe they're just tired of catfish in their living room. I don't know.
Yeah, that too, probably. I think they're all worn out from every time it would rain. You know, you probably can't sleep at night because you're worried that your basement's going to flood. So, but we did have a good cooperative working relationship with them and kind of listened to them and just worked on their schedule. Because there was an older couple that actually most of the people had probably been in these houses for 40 plus years. And one couple was like, well, we're updating our house in Wisconsin. Can we wait a little while until we get that done? Of course, you know, so we waited for them to get their house in Wisconsin done so they had somewhere else to go. So yeah, we worked with them. We didn't rush them. I think that was probably helpful for them as well. So, and the IDNR was cooperative with us. You know, we had a deadline, but then we could extend it because we were trying to work with the property owners. So next slide. So like I said, we ended up grading. It's kind of hard to see, but once we purchased the homes, we ended up, you know, regrading the backyard to make sure that we did capture all that water, because there was some houses still left. You know, we didn't want to end up, taking the houses down and then the water still going into somebody's backyards or something like that. So we regraded the backyards. We removed the fill from the homes. It did look very apparent that when these homes were built, they were filled up. So that obviously took away some of that storage that was there before the homes were built. So we ended up creating 170,000 gallons of storage area. And then we actually are working on establishing native plants. So we made it like a native rain garden vegetation area in the back. And when we were meeting with the residents, we met with them many times. They still wanted to be able to like use their backyards and walk around. So we kept the grass turf near the roads to kind of keep that parkway feel. And then we did keep like a grass strip around there. So if they wanted to walk around or something like that in their backyards, that they could do that. So
How much acreage was involved with that?
I'm not sure actually how many, not that much. Because those aren't the biggest lots, so maybe like 3 or 4 acres. Next slide. So here's just some pictures. We actually started the demolition a year ago, December 2021. There's just kind of some pictures showing the demolition. Next slide. And then you can kind of see in the left picture, that was the grading that was done after. And then in last fall, which obviously it's going to take a while to establish the native vegetation, but it's kind of what it looks like now. So next slide. We did make sure that when we met with the residents, we told all the residents, look, it's still going to flood here. Like we didn't take the water away. It's still going to be there. It's going to rain. It's going to be there, but it's going to be safely stored, and then it will, you know, eventually drain down. So they understand that when we have these years where it's just repetitive rain after repetitive rain, it's going to stay wet, but at least we're not having the water go into somebody's basements or flooding out garages or anything like that. So we always said that, I think, every time we met with them, because we didn't want their expectations to be that we were just magically taking all the water away. So, and then we told them all too, hey, it's going to take 3 to 5 years for these native plants to look good. So kind of bear with us while we're making the plans established. So next slide, please. Another project that we've been working on, this one's, we're just going to start design right now. So I don't know how familiar everybody is with Crystal Lake, but up, you can see kind of the lake up in the location map in the upper left. So when the lake outlets, it goes into Crystal Creek. Crystal Creek makes its way all the way down to Lake Howe Road, goes to the lake and it'll spin and ends up down at the Fox River. So it's all open channel except for one location between two of our schools. We think back in the 1950s, we're kind of assuming when the schools maybe got built, they put the creek into a pipe. Well, the pipe isn't big enough. And then over the years, they added another pipe somewhere along the lines, and both those pipes are definitely not big enough to hold the creek, especially when the lake is high, the water comes out. So it creates this pinch point. The pinch point backs up, it floods the neighbors upstream of there, it floods the country club, it causes a mess all around. So we are working on a project to actually take out those pipes and reestablish the creek back between those schools, so then it will be an open creek from the outlet of Crystal Lake all the way down to the Fox River. So next slide.
So we can give it to King County. It's all yours, John.
So because it's between two, it's on the school property. So we've been working with the school for the last year, making sure that they understand the project, agree with the project. Their first thought was there's going to be this creek in front of, where the school is, both schools. So it's an elementary school and a middle school. So we've been working closely with them, put fences up or keep fences, put some bushes up and that kind of stuff. So we've gotten through that whole process. We finished our preliminary engineering. I'm in the process right now of trying to select a consultant to do design engineering. And then we hope to start the project when school gets out in 2024. And it'll take 2 years to do it. But we did apply in December for some that FEMA brick funding that you were mentioning earlier. We did apply for that. And we also applied for the IEPA 319 grant funding because we are going to take those pipes and restore them back to a natural creek. We're going to put native vegetation in. We're going to really help the ecology of the creek that gets lost when it goes into those storm sewers that we have right now. So, and then like I said, 24 and 25, we're hoping to start construction. So next slide, please. That was it. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Abby. I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Abby, I think interesting kind of how these projects were funded. Did you learn anything specifically for the acquisition project? Did you learn anything going through the application process with IEMA and FEMA that first time? Did they give you any feedback like, hey, this is why you weren't selected for the funding, which is why you went to IDNR?
No, they didn't provide any feedback. To be honest, I think the first time they lost our application. So that was not helpful. The second time, I don't think we ever heard anything back either. So we just kept trying.
Got you. And oh, go ahead. Sorry.
In our funding for the Nippersink, right? I don't know if you heard that, Justin. We also went the IDNR route, and that was for the.
You said for Nippersink?
Yeah, for Nippersink.
DNR actually paid for both of our projects, so our phase 1 and our phase 2. So the initial one was through hazard mitigation grant program, so HMGP money, but the state DNR, they had their global match, so we got everything funded of $1.2 million. About $120,000 came from IEMA and FEMA, but the balance of that was through DNR's global match for that HMGP grant.
Okay.
And then phase 2 was up 1.5 million, 100% through DNR.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Abby, for those holdouts in the acquisition project, did you get a sense that it was the other neighbors that maybe got that, I guess that one resident over the line?
So his was pretty much timing. So he had a business he ran out of his house and he was really just not ready. So he finally, I think, just decided, okay, maybe this is a good option to get myself out of this situation where, I mean, because he did have his basement flood and all kinds of stuff. So I think he just needed more time to process.
We had another question in the room.
Abby, you mentioned about floodproofing basements. FEMA code with no basement below 100-foot elevation, but I know a lot of these houses are grandfathered in. And I believe that before floodproof the basement, you have to have some kind of plan approved by FEMA. Because when you floodproof a basement, you increase the hydrostatic pressure on those walls. And this last spring, Lyle, down DuPage County, had an instance where homeowner's basement flooded, and they were in charge, went to the hardware store, got the biggest pump they could, and pumped that sucker down, caved in the basement. And it wasn't your $500,000 house.
So I'm not aware of any cases where we, the county, have gotten involved in flood proofing someone's basement. Mitigation is to elevate or whatever. I had the same thing happen in Lake County, and the fire department came in and they used their pumper truck to help the people out in Barrington, and it was a horrible scene afterwards. Once
Pump it down a foot, mark it, see what the water is doing, pump it down another foot, see if it's going down, going up, what it's doing. You pump it all down at one time, and she wants to go in. St. Louis County had an instance where they had a flood, and there was a big slope, but it was way away from the houses, and the slope gave way, and the houses were set way back, but there was enough of a slump that the house was cracked in half, and you had a 8-inch crack going across the basement floor. You could almost stick 2 hands in it, and it pulled the support beam was pulled out of the beam pockets.
All right, so we'll only do positive things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, a lot of good lessons learned, Abby, from that project. A couple I grabbed were, working on folks' schedules, right? Like not being too assertive, being accommodating, kind of every step of the way, it sounds like. And then also just being very transparent, very upfront. Very much this is the reality. But all seemed to be very effective and work in the long term. So fantastic. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. It's so important that, it's not us just sitting here talking about the importance of hazard mitigation planning and going through this process. It's really good examples like this that, make it all real, make it worthwhile. So thank you, Abby, so much. All right. I'm going to get you out of here in just a minute. So bear with me. All right. So just going to do a couple next steps before we let folks go. Again, just want to say thank you for everybody's participation, for their patience today. I know it was a lot of information to cover. I promise these will be a lot more interactive going forward, but we must be grounded in something, and so just needed to make sure that everybody's familiar with the process before we actually ask you to start engaging with it. So a couple final reminders here. Please, if you have not already, fill out and submit your letter of intent to EMA. Send those soft copies to the email here. Again, we'll reiterate this in our follow-up email. You can also mail physical copies. Dave and Bob, do you guys have some hard copies there?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Excellent. That's even better. That's the gold standard. So yeah, just making sure that folks are getting those letters of intent back for our records. Also, again, if you're in the room, please make sure to use the sign-in sheet. For folks on the phone, I'll drop the link into the survey again. Sorry, for folks participating virtually, I'll drop the link to the survey again. You can also take a picture of the QR code here if it's easier, and get to it that way. Again, want to make sure that we're documenting everybody's everybody's time. Lastly, again, two quick reminders here. We'll follow up, but any plans, reports, data not on that slide. We'll get these slides out so everybody can see them. We're looking for that, as well as any examples of mitigation projects, just like the stormwater project we just heard from Crystal Lake. Just need, just a little bit of information there to make sure that we're considering it as we're looking towards revisiting our goals, objectives, and action plan for mitigation. And then last but not least, just start thinking about some ways you can help us get that public survey announcement out. Again, we'll tee this up for you guys. You don't have to remember it right now, but all that to say, if you've got a social media account, in your department, if you've got an e-newsletter, anything that is going out to partners and residences, we'd love to take advantage of that. So, we'll be sending some information out to this group, and hopefully you guys can help us. We're also planning on doing some in-person engagement, particularly in places where might just not be as much of as access to Wi-Fi and the internet, to make sure that we're hearing from folks there as well. So all that to say, appreciate the help in advance. All right, Bob, Dave, anything to close us down?
Yeah, I just want to let people know why we're so conscious of the sign-in sheets and checking in. I have to meet a match, and I can use a soft match. So that's what we're using those hours for, that, you're here for the meetings, or you're, working on the plan individually. It's a large number that I have to meet for the match. Otherwise, Bob will be in the square with tin cups and collecting money. So that's a big part of it. And it also shows FEMA that we were engaged and we were involved and we invested time and effort into it. So, but the big thing is to help meet that soft match. Adam?
Are we rounding up on that? I put an hour and a half in that survey. Is that okay?
Well, it took you time to get here and it took you time to get back.
I just want to make sure.
Yep, and you were probably thinking about this from early this morning.
The only thing that I would add to today's, as much of this information as we can will be shared out. We talked to Alicia, our communications person at the county, for the county newsletter that a lot of you get already, our websites, and through social media accounts. The timekeeping survey has already been posted on our website, like I said, and a lot of this information from today will be posted as soon as possible.
We tend to be very insular, sometimes in government. And, when I look back at past plans, I see involvement of our communities and our townships, but not so much from our public, right? And, we put an obscure thing on page 42 of the newspaper, a 41-page newspaper. But anyways, we don't get that input. And this time it'd be interesting to get that feedback from our residents or whatever. With social media being what it is, I'm sure we'll have comments. Maybe we'll just post something on Nextdoor and we're good to go. It won't be about a yard sales or a coyote in the backyard, so it'll get some attention. But it's really important to us that we do get, how our residents feel or thoughts that they may have. So, thank you. Dustin, back to you to close it out.
Nope. Thank you all. More importantly, we're just here to help shepherd this process along. You guys are the ones that matter. So thank you so much for your participation. Really looking forward to this in-person workshop on Thursday, February 23rd. Again, we'll get that we'll get that updated invite out to folks as soon as possible. But just want to say thank you again for folks that are in the room. Thank you so much for traveling to be with us, and for folks that are participating virtually, thanks all the same. Look forward to seeing hopefully more folks during our in-person workshop here in the next month. But with that, everybody have a wonderful afternoon. If we don't talk to you, have a fantastic weekend, and just appreciate your support because we'll be looking for it in the coming weeks and months.
And Justin, the chief, is here from Cary, and he has entered on the calendar anyways the next 2 dates. So the next 2 dates will be here in the Cary Village Hall.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. We appreciate you letting us take advantage of your hospitality and your space. All right. Everyone have a great afternoon. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.